Welcome to Busted Speakers. I'm Cam,
I'm Alex.
And I'm Ed.
and today we're reviewing an album that we got as a promotion, pre-release from a new band, relatively new, called Agvirre. We're not entirely sure how to pronounce it. Bit of a fault on our parts. So this came about because a fellow user of RYM called Frenchie posted on the forums looking for music reviewers of various kinds to send press kits to, because he works with promoting a bunch of independent labels in the UK. And this is the first of so far 3 EPs that he sent us from a variety of bands. And so we just wanted to make sure we give a thanks to Frenchie. And from what we understand, he might be involved with this band in some way or another.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form.
Yep. So the band are described as a post-black metal collective, and this is their debut EP, Silence.
So, Cam, given that metal, even though generally you seem to enjoy it, isn't your forte, did you find this difficult to listen to, or was it something of a gateway into understanding this type of metal?
Well, I can't really call it a gateway because I haven't tried anything else in
true.
this
It hasn't,
in this
you haven't
area
gone through
yet.
the gateway further yet. You're still in the gateway.
Yeah, so the press kit says that this encompasses elements of black metal, shoegaze, post-metal, noise, and electronic. I'm not entirely sure how much of any of those I got, because I don't know anything about black metal or post-metal, so I wasn't really thinking about it through those ways. But then when they said shoegaze, I'm like, okay, that kind of gives me a filter I can start approaching this through. And then when I listen to it, there's a lot of strings, a violin, viola, I'm not entirely sure which, throughout both
violin.
Throughout both of the main tracks on this. And that kind of gave me a like a post-rock vibe.
Yeah.
And so I was able to think about it through that lens. And to that end, I thought it was pretty interesting. Like, I love how the violin added to the atmosphere. Like, I don't know what to expect from anything in the world of metal besides just, guitars and drums and bass and whatever kind of vocals they want. So having the violin definitely gave me a strong anchor point I was just able to use to guide me through this. And I think that's also kind of like why it's on the album in the first place, because this is described as an exploration of the struggles that people have dealing with mental illness. And I think that, like, the violin and some other things, like there's like the third track on this, the last minute of it is the only part with clean vocals.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff like that is meant to be like representative of maybe sanity or lucidity that somebody is clinging to while they're struggling with whatever mental health issues they're having. And I mean, that seems kind of like the most obvious interpretation, but it could be obvious because it's how a lot of people deal with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I felt that. Like, I felt the intensity of the metal part of it and the screamed sort of vocals, and the strings kind of just carried me through it until we get to the release of the clean vocals at the very end of it.
Yeah, I interpreted that more as like light at the end of the tunnel after the struggle.
Yeah.
That last minute, just because it is at the very end of the EP release. But yeah, I get what you mean.
I think to touch on how the strings are implemented here as well, it feels a touch Godspeed to me.
Yeah.
Though the quality of the string passages on here definitely fluctuates compared to the efforts of a band like Godspeed, in my view.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Not to say that Godspeed have been particularly great lately. I don't think that's a controversial opinion to have. But certainly compared to their best stuff, the strings here feel a little more amateurish. And, this is a pretty small release, and I feel good that we're giving it coverage, even though, admittedly, I was not too hot on this. But I think to speak on the versatility of, like, the different genres and whatnot, I think that's kind of where it falls apart for me, because, like, there's a lot of points on here where, across the 3 tracks, which is basically just 2 extended songs that pass the 10-minute mark and a quick kind of atmospheric post-rocky intro track that drones on all the way through and, you know, serves its purpose by all means. It kind of feels super jumbled. I felt like the second track kept stopping and starting rather than like naturally developing a path through these different, you know, different ambitions that the band have had in terms of what sounds they want to explore.
I kept going back to the thing that was said in the press kit release that this is an exploration orally of like what mental illness, like exploring into that.
Yeah.
Told through this, and the stop-start parts felt like maybe the struggle to move on, develop. So maybe I was looking, even not thinking quite in terms of musical quality, but in how it represented the mental struggles.
I can definitely see how you see it that way. It just doesn't really work for me musically.
Maybe I'm thinking too literally in a connection there, but that's definitely something I thought of.
Well, truth be told, I hadn't actually read the press release before listening to this, so I didn't have that context of the album being an exploration of mental health. I keep saying album, you know I mean EP. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's only 3 tracks, like I said. But yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of this type of music, then like I definitely recommend it. If you like the more atmospheric post-rock inspired side of black metal that bands like Death Heaven delve into, then you'll probably find a lot to like here. So that's kind of my recommendation, really.
So I've had knowledge of this album, EP. Such a go-to word, album, because we don't review EPs as often.
No.
But yeah, this EP, I've known it for a few weeks now. We've had it ready to get reviewed for a while, so I've definitely spent more time with this release than almost any other for the channel. I've listened to it maybe 10 times. Sometimes I just have spare time, and you know, this is a quick thing to listen to.
It's pretty short.
And you know, sometimes I just have a spare 20 minutes where there's nothing else to do, and we didn't know when this was going to be reviewed, to be fair. So we're reviewing it now. For a while listening to this, I didn't really get it. It's definitely not even in a release structural format that I necessarily often listen to music in. Songs that are over 10 minutes have to work hard to justify being that length. And for a while, this did not do that. I found the actual band playing, even removed from the strings or the violins, to be pretty mixed badly, kinda. Well, it's weird. The production's some of the cleanest I've ever heard for black metal. I don't know if that's because it's atmospheric black metal's generally mixed better, but I feel like I've heard a lot.
I felt that way about the vocals as well. Like, I thought the vocals on here were way too dry, especially the screamed parts.
Yeah, they didn't have much raw meat to them. It just felt like really cleanly done, and impeccably done, and maybe that's good. I mean, I've never heard that much black metal before, and this is... I've heard bits over the years, but it's definitely not a main genre I go into. So that was something. I found that it basically boiled down to the band and the violin accompaniment. The band, I felt, they were mixed in a weird way, where the drums really pop out very loudly and clearly, and then sort of guitars and bass, just complete mess with the vocals sort of on top of it. That is kind of hard to tangibly make out any highlighted parts. But the thing is, the way that contrasted with the violins consistently made it quite nice background noise, which I don't think is what this was intended to be as. But honestly, I've listened to this 3 times just as background music, and it kind of works, because it's a constant, similar type of flow to me.
That's an interesting recommendation.
It's black metal background music.
Yeah.
It's probably not what this was intended for.
This is the music that you listen to in the university library when you want something that's not going to distract you from your work, but you don't want to hear the people yelling in a public library while you do work.
Yeah, it's loud enough that that could be definitely phased out in the background.
That's not my conclusion on this, by the way. That's just a hypothetical situation that this could be applied to.
Comedic comment, though. I like that. Yeah. And then there was one time last weekend where I was really pissed off, just a really bad weekend. Things were not going right in any way.
Damn.
And I feel like I connected more with the vocal pain, because the vocalist, I'm not sure who it is, sorry on that regard, but it really bears his soul, and there's a lot of actually really well shouted parts, really a lot of emotion bearing parts. I felt like I could actually connect with on an emotional level last weekend when this was. So I'm not saying that made me extremely prefer the music as a whole, but it definitely made me appreciate it a lot more. I'm not saying you have to go through an experience like that to get anything out of this release, but it definitely helped me to enjoy it more, or at least vibe with it more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, speaking on that, I'd say I'm a pretty chill guy, but I listen to a lot of heavy music. What you said before about not typically delving into tracks of like this length, I listen to Swans a lot. Most of their songs
for sure.
are super duper long. So I feel like when I listen to something like this and it doesn't feel like a cohesive whole in each song, it's kind of noticeable to me, even though I'm not particularly an aficionado of black metal. I do recognize the qualities that black metal is meant to have over, say, regular metal, but like it really did feel super jumbled, and not in the sense that this was kind of like a mixtape type dealio where yes, it's only 3 tracks, but you're having all these different passages come in across all 3 as if it's almost like a bunch of different songs all mashed together. It's not really like that. Each song does feel like it is trying to be its own individual thing. I'd say the most successful of the 3 was the 3rd track here, which is titled I forgot to write in my notes the title of the 3rd track, but
well, Muzzle and Mask is the second one, and
yeah, Abandonment is the name of the 3rd track.
The third one.
Yeah, so I thought that end passage with the cleanly sung vocals was pretty cool, honestly, all things considered. A nice ending to this EP.
It's a nice ending. I really did think it was like a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Hope, musically.
But to go into a little more detail on how I felt about the instrumentation here, the drums are way too compressed, in my view.
They're compressed and they're quite loud, but I do actually think they're pretty well played.
Yeah, they're certainly well played, but this is my issue with it. It sounds kind of like MIDI to me, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but in terms of songs like this that are trying to build atmosphere, I feel like a human feel is in the way the drums are mixed is what they should aim for.
Didn't Burzum get into black metal MIDI type things in the late 90s?
I couldn't tell you. I'm no expert on Burzum, but
yeah, true.
In terms of this release, like even if the drums were played physically, because I don't know if they were just programmed in MIDI, like the fact that I don't know kind of speaks volumes to how I feel about the mixing here. Even if they were played in MIDI, like this is not me necessarily saying like MIDI drums suck. If they were played in MIDI, you could make them sound more human than they do here. That was kind of an issue for me.
Just in this context, it didn't really work for you.
Yeah, and likewise, I wasn't really feeling the vocals. They seem kind of typical of the genre, though perhaps like they're a little drier than what I'm used to hearing, as I said before. And they're not particularly guttural, though I kind of appreciated that on a more like down-to-earth sense of the kind of emotions that they're trying to get across. It doesn't sound like this character. It sounds like the guy actually just, you know, screaming his brains out for an extended amount of time.
I'd say it's a solid attempt, although yeah, true.
Yeah, it's just kind of a mixed bag overall. I dig, like, some of the guitar tones here sound great, by all means, but others sound super thin and lifeless.
I feel like they were mixed too lowly and in with the bass for me to even appreciate that.
Particularly towards the beginning of the second track, I'd say.
Yeah, because there's a lot of potential here, and I feel like I'm not saying it needs to be remixed because it's pretty good as is. I definitely will return to this at some points, but I feel like they're close to making something extremely, like, really solid. I feel like the fact the violins are so highly mixed most of the time, it almost feels like classical crossover black metal at points. Yeah. Which I don't think is what they were going for. I don't know if atmospheric black metal often has that much violin accompaniment at all to create an atmosphere. I feel like it doesn't. So
I'd say that's more the post-rock influences coming through.
post-rock, okay, that's another genre I'm not 100% well versed in. Although I'm not sure how you get 100% well versed in a genre.
So I'm worried that my rating for this might not be worth a lot because I'm so unfamiliar with metal and especially more deeper, intense genres like black metal. So I don't really know what elements of the genre to be listening for whether this band does them well or poorly. And I also I think I have this condition where I struggle to separate sounds when when a bunch of noises are just all happening at once. Like, I can't hear people talking right in front of my face if there's a lot of rattling and things going on around me. And so I think that kind of plays into how I hear a noisier work like this. And so I was just pretty much letting everything just wash over me, and I was picking out the elements that just were the most prominent to me. So that'd be the vocals and the violins, and I couldn't even I was silent during that whole discussion that you guys were having about whether or not the things were compressed or whatever, because I couldn't tell. I had nothing to contribute to that.
Fair.
So on the one hand, I feel like my rating isn't going to be worth quite as much because I think I just experienced this differently from how most other people would. But at the same time, I enjoyed it. I could see myself trying to use this as a gateway now, like you were saying, Alex.
The gateway.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna say something else with that.
It's just the gateway.
The gateway.
It's just the gateway.
Yeah. So, maybe I'm being generous in general, but I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 just because I did enjoy it. I did feel the mental health struggle that they were trying to embody with the music, and I think for the most part it comes through, but I don't want to overrate it because I don't know enough about the genre to say one way or the other, and I don't want to underrate it just because it's something I'm not very familiar with.
Nice.
Okay,
Alex?
So to begin with, I was probably more on the 5 scale, but there's enough solid potential here. I definitely came to connect with it emotionally last week. The contrast, even if it is rudimentary and is a bit overlong, between the prettily done violin string arrangements and the raw, rough band playing, the contrast there was enough to, keep me enjoying it, keep me listening to it. Primo black metal background, listening music, classical crossover fun. I will give this a 6 out of 10. It's a solid start for the band. I feel like they could do a more concentrated, strong thing. I don't know if they're going to go for more longer songs or shorter, more compact ones. I think I'd prefer shorter, more compact ones. But that's just me. Solid start for this group. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I hate to be a downer, but I don't really enjoy this release that much. But I felt like there wasn't really a whole ton of content here to comment on. Granted, it's been billed as an EP. There's 2 pretty long songs on here. The intro is just a reasonably atmospheric drone. There's not really much to comment on there, in my opinion.
Fair.
But yeah, like I was saying before, that I just have a lot of issues with the mix. I think it's kind of jumbled. I think in places I was really confused by how they decided to pan the guitars. They ended up sounding really thin in places where I felt like they should have filled out the mix and given it more of a power to it, more of a ferocity to these more black metal influenced sections. The vocals as well, I didn't love, but I can appreciate the passion and I can appreciate the sentiment that's gone into this recording. I dig some of the guitar tones. Like I said, others sound kind of thin. And then there's the electronics element, which I honestly think the synths in the second track here, Muzzle and Mask, are kind of weakly implemented. Like, I was kind of surprised when they came in, because up
Yeah,
until
they
that point, there's
weren't
not
even
really
worth mentioning by me necessarily.
Yeah, I figured I'd cover
like,
them.
that's part of where the noise kind of got to me, because I couldn't even tell where any synths really
Yeah.
were.
I mean, there's a point where it gets really minimal with these synths, but it's so thin. Again, there's not really any shape and form to what's going on. It really does kind of feel like a mess. But to highlight a part that I actually really enjoyed on the third track, Abandonment, there's these really cool breaks that happen about 3 minutes in, where the drums are just stopping and starting, and the riffing is just stopping and starting, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
pretty
I
engaging.
remember that bit. Yeah.
Like on first listen, I got to that part and I was like, note this down because I like this. I want to give this praise where praise is due, in my opinion.
I think that's where that track pretty much starts to really kick in for me.
Yeah, and I'd say from that point onward, I actually generally enjoy that song. So like, I think there's definitely potential here. This is my, closing thing on this. There's certainly potential to be heard. Some of the passages are pretty cool, particularly on track 3, but on the whole, I think it's kind of a forgettable release because it doesn't feel quite focused enough. It doesn't feel like they're getting across the kind of genre experiments that they seem to want to get involved in. It just feels kind of jumbled in my view, so I'd say 5 out of 10. I have only listened to this twice, so maybe you should trust Alex a bit more on this than me, given that he's listened to it quite a few times, and maybe there's something there that should click for me, but as of yet, I don't know.
There maybe is. I don't know. I don't know if extreme exposure to a fin necessarily makes it better, because I feel like I've capped out on the enjoyment at this point. But
you reach a level of familiarity after a while with a release.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's that crazy black metal violin heavy EP. Let's put that on. I mean, you can get familiar with anything, and this was a good fin to get familiar with. So
yeah.
So overall, we'd say potential partially met, maybe more so for Cam, but one thing's for certain: at least there's the gateway.
The
gateway.
Maybe this could be the gateway for you.
All right. Yeah. Okay, Silence is out on January 24th on CD through Trepanation Recordings and on tape through Surviving Sounds. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.